Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a very special, but also quite ordinary episode of the Soldiers of Cinema podcast. Very special because we're here together, and it's always special when we're here together, but there's nothing else special about this episode. I'm Cullen McFader. Well, there could be something special, maybe the movie's special to some people.
I mean, hold on. Don't sell ourselves short, man. Maybe,
true, very true.
Or maybe special is our ordinary. Like,
that's a good point.
Just, I mean, come on.
The bar is so high.
Well, I mean, or maybe you're just like approaching this from a very Zen-like perspective, right? That it is both everything and nothing simultaneously. It exists
at
the
river, water flowing down the river.
It exists at the juxtaposition of a seemingly paradoxical arrangement of states. How's that? Is that what you meant? That's what you meant. That's what you meant. There. Yes. Okay. Well, please continue then.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
Wait, did you even mention the film? Did you mention that?
Not yet. No, we have not. The film is not. I don't even think I mentioned your name either.
That's okay. I will just
Coffee. I think people know who we are at this point.
People know.
But today we are talking about my pick, which is 2007's Zodiac, directed by David Fincher. I'm assuming most people have probably seen this movie. If you haven't, I recommend watching it.
At least I would imagine most people that would be listening to this episode of this podcast probably would have seen it, right? I would imagine, yeah.
We're going to be talking about everything in a lot of detail, so I'd recommend, going to check it out.
Dear editor, this is the murderer of the two teenagers last Christmas at Lake Herman and the girl on the 4th of July.
I want you to print this cipher on the front page of your paper.
He wants his code in the afternoon edition.
Ray Smith, don't you have a cartoon to finish?
The Zodiac Killer has come to San Francisco.
Another letter.
School children make nice targets.
He gave himself a name.
Greek, Morse code, astrological signs. This guy's used them all.
I like killing people because man is the most dangerous animal of all.
How does one do that?
I like puzzles. I do them a lot.
Got any hard suspects?
About 90 an hour. I'm up to around 500.
You got 4 crime scenes, not a single usable print. You can't think of this case in normal police terms.
He's breaking the pattern.
Lana said you were a cartoonist.
Oh, yeah.
What are you doing at a gun range?
I just want to help.
What are you, some kind of Boy Scout?
Eagle Scout, actually. First class. Well, I've been thinking...
Oh, God save us all.
There's no evidence, Robert.
What do you mean there's no evidence? You have him seen with the ciphers, the military blueprints, the bloody knife.
All circumstantial.
Why do you need to do this?
Because nobody else will.
Dave, you made a mistake! Get away from the window.
Paul, are you okay?
No.
Why'd you do it? You put your face out there for him to see.
Hello? Who is this?
Zodiac was my job. It's not yours.
He's still out there, Dave.
Killing is his compulsion. It drives him. It's in his blood.
Jeez.
What?
Squirrels.
This is the Zodiac speaking.
I've begun.
I can give you a lift to the service station.
Do you always go around helping people in the night?
I'm not the Zodiac. And if I was, I certainly wouldn't tell you.
Are you sure there's nobody else in the house?
But yeah, so this was my pick. But you know what? Maybe I will give you the floor first because I think mine's going to be a little bit longer. So I'll give you the floor to talk about your personal experiences with the film. What did you think?
To kick it off.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So first of all, I'm really interested to hear about your experience with this because it's a film that you and I don't think have talked about like casually or in passing, outside of the podcast before and all the years we've known each other. I don't have a memory of you really mentioning this because there's some films that you've mentioned over and over and that they were important to you, and then of course we've done an episode on them on the podcast at one point or another. And likewise for me too, I'm sure. So I'll be interested to hear that. I mean, for me, I'm racking my brain. Okay, so it's totally possible that I went to go see this film at the theater. It's honestly quite likely. But it's one of those, like, I will often have a recollection of a film that I've seen in a theater. Of course, I can't remember them all. I mean, I don't know how many films I've seen in theaters, but it's got to be in the hundreds at this point in my life. Or at least, somewhere around there. But I don't have a recollection of it. So I probably went to go see it at the theater, but I have no memory or recollection of that viewing. And then since then, when it was released on Blu-ray, I remember I grabbed a copy of it and I watched it again. And then, of course, I've seen it for this episode just last night. So I would have to say that I don't have, there's no strong, I don't have any strong recollection or memories. I don't, there's no like, ooh, this film really hit me and it stood out to me, or it was an inspiration or any of those things. It kind of sits there for me, and we'll talk about this a little bit about, but my own kind of personal, just real quick kind of high level, reaction to it. It's a film that Fincher is an interesting director to me personally, in that, I always recognize his technical excellence and proficiency, and his films are ridiculously tight. And always extremely well made. And of course, he's a director that is notorious for his attention to detail. But that doesn't always translate in a moving or memorable film to me. I just have to be frank. And this film kind of sits in that space for me, where I can recognize that, especially for its day, an extremely technically well-made film. It's also one that's got great performances. I mean, there's no question that Fincher elicits good performances from his cast. This is the case over and over again. But I have to say that this film is not particularly emotionally engaging to me. And even at some points, this film is boring to me. But we'll go. Yes,
the B
we'll
word.
Go into some. I know, and I feel almost. And trust me, I feel like the sacrilege. Like I feel the blasphemy. Like as I say those words, I feel bad about saying them. I know Fincher is such a respected director, and especially amongst a lot of filmmakers, he's a director that people look up to. But again, I guess for me personally, it doesn't always translate into necessarily a super compelling piece of work, but so there's my kind of high level take on it, and I'm really interested to hear why you picked the film and what its like relevance or what its meaning is for you.
Yeah, I mean, just off the bat, I can totally empathize with that. I'm actually not. I like Fincher. I like most of his movies, and I've seen, I think, all of them. And I always tend to enjoy them, but he's definitely not a director that I would consider to be, very much of an inspiration to me, or much of a, on a conscious level. I wouldn't say that he's like a favorite of mine. But I would say, I think, I'm pretty safe in saying that this is probably my favorite of his.
Interesting.
And I think that there's a lot of context around that, which I'll get into in a moment. But I think that, I can totally understand what you mean by the, I think that there's a lot of sterility in a lot of his movies, in a certain sense. And I think that kind of translates, especially here. Now, I do think that it actually works in this movie. But we'll get into that when we kind of discuss a little bit more of the meat of it. But in terms of my actual, personal kind of connection to the film, so I didn't see it when it came out. I was 9, so probably a little bit too young to see it. But for I think my 16th birthday,
you were friend, 9. Oh.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
Now, what was I doing then? I was probably, I don't know, playing with Lego or something. But on my 16th birthday, my friend got me the Blu-ray that you had mentioned, which is the director's cut, which there's not huge differences, but I think like a few of the scenes are 30 or 40 seconds longer. There's just some shifts. So it's not
curtains
like a massively
have been
different.
Straightened in the background, or what?
Exactly.
No, that's a different.
That's the new. What is that? Panic Room. I think he did that.
Yes.
But no, so I watched it then when I was 16, and I think was just kind of like sucked into it. And I think a big part of that is because I've always been very interested in like crime and true crime and criminology. I mean, I went to school for criminology at U of T.
Oh wow!
So it's always been something that's kind of fascinated me. I'm holding them up for you to see, which obviously this is a podcast, but I've got both Gray Smith's Zodiac books here, the original and Zodiac Unmasked. I've also got
he wrote 2.
Yeah, he wrote 2. Yeah, and I've
wow.
got this is the Freedom of Information Act FBI file on the Zodiac Killer. So I also have that.
Okay, so you're coming at this as like the subject matter is seriously interesting to you.
Yeah,
so
and it's like it's a culturally interesting thing to me. You know, like and I think that's one of the reasons that this movie resonates with me is because it's not It's not, and again, we'll speak about this in detail later, but the film doesn't seem so interested in. I mean, obviously it's hyper detailed, and it does its best to make the crimes very accurate to how they happen in real life, and uses witness testimony and is shot at the real locations and things like that, primarily. And so there's a hyper detail in that way. But in terms of its philosophy, it seems less interested in approaching this kind of in a similar way to The Cell. Like, it's less interested in approaching this like a standard, serial killer movie, and more about the psychology and the culture that kind of surrounded what was going on at the time, and that I think is what really interests me in this movie. Even beyond that, I actually, the last time I was in San Francisco, I dragged my friends around to go to all of the Zodiac spots. So we went to Washington and Cherry, and then they were completely uninterested. I was just like, trudging along, like, we've got to go down in the park where he, evaded the motorcycles. And I've never been to Vallejo, but I've always been curious to go to Vallejo and to see those spots and Lake Berryessa and all that. As a kind of cultural thing, I've always been interested in the Zodiac Killer. I think, that's not too uncommon. I think a lot of people tend to be, but
sure. No. Now, wait. Just to clarify, now is that totally aside from this film, or did you see this film when you were young and you were inspired to go follow?
I had an interest in that sort of thing beforehand. Like since I was a kid, Silence of the Lambs has been one of my favorite movies. So
which we've done. Check out that episode.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. Way back. But that, so it's always been an interest of mine, and I obviously always knew who the Zodiac Killer was. I know his identity, but no, I knew like the story of him and all that sort of thing. So it wasn't necessarily something that was unfamiliar to me. But I don't think I'd ever really read about the specifics. I definitely hadn't. I got the books after the seeing the movie and things like that. So this kind of, I think, sparked an interest in specifically that case for me. But yeah, and then in terms of, the movie, so at this point I have seen it in theaters. There was a re-release at TIFF a few years ago, and I got to see it on a big screen, which was nice. I probably watched
in all
this
of its
movie,
1080p glory.
Yes, exactly, in that Thompson Viper, that very smooth,
which we'll talk about. Yes,
that smooth, weird, motion blur stuff.
Yes.
No, I also. I probably watched this movie, I watch it quite like I don't think I know how many times I've seen it, and it's weird because it kind of, I almost agree with you in the sense where you say that it's kind of like a movie that kind of exists in your periphery, and it's sort of that to me too, despite the fact that I really like it. It's this weird sort of almost like comfort food to me where, I would say it's probably one of my favorite movies. Like, it's probably somewhere in the top 50 somewhere. So it's not like, it's not top 10. It's not the most, but I do watch it very regularly. But it's almost this weird thing where it's like, I'll just kind of throw it on because it feels like time to watch it again. It's not a movie that I'm like really thinking about all the time. And it's definitely not a movie that I'm thinking about when I'm creating something or when I'm writing, or like, it's not a movie, as I said before, that I'm like pulling inspiration from. In some ways. I mean, in other ways, I think that I do really like appreciate the ways that certain things are done in this, but yeah. And so it's like, every fall, usually, I know right now it's February, so it's not quite the time I usually watch it, but normally in like September, October, I'll put it on because
You
it
have
just
a
kind of
season.
feels like a very fall movie to me. So
Okay.
it's yeah, that's kind of my, I think, my
Interesting.
relationship with it. You know, I think that it's
Now, what
more-
is it
yeah.
about? Like, I just want to like ask you just to kind of hone in just a little bit more. I mean, what if you had to try to summarize like what it was about the film? Now, obviously, you've talked about that you're very interested in the Zodiac Killer, the actual like true crime events that happened. And that's something that's like intriguing to you, and you've also obviously like gone out and you've read the books that this film is kind of based on, at least in part. Is that like? But if you kind of remove that a little bit, like, is there like the film? I'm just trying to kind of hone in on like what does make this film like a comfort food. For
yeah, I
you
think
if
it's.
you
I
could-
honestly think it's the characterization and the cast.
Okay. Okay.
I think that I remember actually before I had ever seen the movie, one of the first times I kind of thought about it and sort of thought, oh, I should probably check that out, was I saw somebody online mention that it reminded them not in tone, but in a weird way it reminded them of Jaws, where you kind of have these three main characters who are hunting this, so-and-so beast.
Okay.
And the story revolves more around their lives than it does.
Dangerous animal.
Yes, exactly.
Hunting a
exactly.
dangerous
game.
animal.
And so I think that in a similar way to like when you watch Jaws, you kind of feel like you're on the boat with Quint and Brody and Hooper and all that. Like this sort of has a similar feeling to me, where it's like
It's like a palpable camaraderie that like
I
you
really
feel.
like.
Okay.
I really like Jake Gyllenhaal in this. I really like Mark Ruffalo. I really like Robert Downey Jr. in this. And it's like even the supporting character. Like there's this kind of weird thing where by the end of the film you feel like all the supporting cast are almost like family members too, because they just appear again and again and again through the movie. Like they keep kind of popping back up. And so I think
I would totally agree.
Characterization. I love the soundtrack. David Shire is a great composer. And he did, of course, The Conversation with Coppola, which is probably his most famous score, but I love his work here. I have both the soundtrack, like the score, and the soundtrack as in the mix of 60s and 70s music that they've got in this, which is also very good. I really like the choices they've made there. But I think generally in terms of just the tone of the film too, I think it feels it almost, I don't know why, but it kind of feels to me like when you're a kid and you're like playing pretend with your friends, and it's like, well, let's hunt the Zodiac Killer down, and like let's go sit at a diner and pretend that we're talking about the Zodiac Killer.
Maybe that's how you played with your. That's how you played with your friends. I can just picture this. Hold on. Let me. So let me say one thing first of all. I mean, I would say that the performances in this film are the strongest aspect of the film to me. The most compelling. So at least on some kind of level, I'm right there with you on that. But hold on, this is just such a funny, like visualization. I can just see you. No, I can totally like see you. Which character would you play? Would you be Jake? But I could see you like
probably Jake.
You're
I'd probably
in like
want to be. I'd probably want to be Mark Ruffalo, but I think I'd be Jake.
Yeah, you're like in the street with your friends, like neighborhood friends. You're like 8-9 years old, and you're like all right, let's go. I've got this cipher. We need from the Zodiac Killer. We need to run around the neighborhood. You'd make like I could just see you making a game out of that with your friends. That's awesome.
That's kind of what it is kind of what it feels like to me, where it's like it's I think because I've seen this movie so many times as well that
it's just a familiar.
It's almost difficult to talk about in a divorced sense, because I think of these scenes and I'm just like, well, I kind of know the ins and outs of each of them. Like I could I watched this movie with attention when I watched it for this episode, but I could probably put this movie on and like leave the room and listen to it and kind of know exactly where it is, what it looks like. And but again, though, I think the point I want to stress is the weirdest part about that is it's almost like an academic thing. Like, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I don't mean that in a way that I've like academicized, if that's a word.
Academicized.
I've not like it's not
Intellectualized.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like that
Yeah.
to me. But it's more something that I feel like I know really well. Like it's like a
Sure.
subject matter almost, and so
I get
it's
it.
this bizarre
Yeah.
thing where it's like, okay, I can watch this movie and kind of know exactly what the next shot is and all this stuff, despite the fact that it's not super inspirational to me, in a way that, like, you know, say a Terrence
Interesting.
Malick
Okay.
movie or something is, right?
Well, let's break down some of the aspects of the film. I mean, you know, let's kind of start at the top with Fincher, because I think, right, I mean, obviously, you know, this is a Fincher film, and it's, you know, I feel like this film kind of is at an interesting like juncture in his career. So I'm curious just to kind of put this in context of his work before we run off and talk about exactly what, you know, some of the choices he's made in this film. But it's like you have Alien 3. Boy, that's like it's a whole other thing, right?
Yeah. He hates
before
that.
Before that, he had done a lot of work in music videos and commercials. You know, so I think like he shows up, you know, as a filmmaker, very technically proficient from that work. But you've got Alien 3, then you have 7, which really kind of breaks him through, right? Then you have The Game, you have Fight Club, and then Panic Room, which I think is the beginning of a shift for him tonally, stylistically. And then here with Zodiac, I feel like we really start to come into this. I mean, and I would kind of agree with you in that there is like a certain sterility. This is where I feel like his style, I guess, and it's not that it hasn't been fluid throughout the rest of his work, but I feel like this is really where that Fincher look and feel really almost hits a peak, or I don't know, you know, or is kind of like gels for the you know. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, I think Panic Room
definitely
really begins that, but
yeah. This is kind of like it feels like he kind of falls into the place that he has been since, in visual style, and in the performances that he's getting out of. Like, I feel like you look at 7 and you look at Fight Club, and the performances are a bit looser there. It seems like the camera's a bit looser. The way what he's doing just feels a little bit less refined, and maybe that was a limitation of his then, and now that he kind of landed on this, when he got to this point, he was able to kind of have that full control. I don't know, or it could have been just that he changed as a person. But yeah, definitely agree that this feels like the point where he, like, you know, you look at this and you look at, you know, something like The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Social Network, The Killer, most recent, and
they feel
you kind of
feel
see
like the films from the same.
You definitely can see kind of like an auteurship from.
But you
from
look
start
at
to
this in
finish there.
Fight Club, and you scratch your head. I feel like, right?
Or even, I mean, even this and 7, which are both, you know, serial killer movies, right? Like 7 is so different from this. And I can understand why a lot of people love 7, but I find 7 a bit more, I guess, derivative than this one. I think that this one is so unique in a lot of ways, whereas 7, which I do enjoy 7. I find that 7 kind of, to me, just feels a little bit more like a standard fare of like, oh, it's like, let's find the killer and all this stuff. Whereas this feels it's a very unique movie. Like, there's not a lot of other movies I could say feel like this. So, but totally, I feel like he definitely came into kind of like the David Fincherisms in this movie. And like you said, Panic Room started that, but this he landed on.
And I feel like you know, one of the things that we see in Panic Room that we really see kind of come to the fore even more, or I don't know, he doesn't really want it to come to the fore, but it you know, we've talked quite a bit about how a lot of people have talked a lot about how Fincher is a very technically focused director. And I mean specifically on technology. You know, he is technical, but I mean, you know, in the sense that I feel like he's almost, you know, he's a technician almost when he's working. In my imagination, I've not worked with him,
but very early adapter of digital technology, filmmaking technology.
Yeah, but he is like very specifically in this film. I'm curious about your thoughts on the CGI use. I know it feels like we're kind of getting a little specific, and we'll drill back out and we'll talk about some of the larger stuff. But it was interesting watching this. You know, I think the first couple times that I had seen this film, it wasn't as noticeable to me. And maybe this is just one of those things where, okay, you know, the march of technical progress is, you know, it just keeps marching on. And, you know, here we are now in 2025, and we're looking at a film that was made in 2007. But now it's like, even on this, you know, the beautiful, you know, sweeping kind of, where we open up on San Francisco, right? And we like come out off the water, and I'm like, woo, that looks like really CGI to me. And of course it is. And we've got
that opening shot of the fireworks on the 4th of July as well looks very
right. And it's like, ooh, that really stands out to me. And you've got the overhead shot where the camera is stuck to the taxi, and it looks like I'm playing Grand Theft Auto.
I know,
so, you know, like literally. And I'm like, well, you know, now obviously, look, we're like I said, we're in 2025. We're looking at a film that was made almost 20 years ago. So of course I get it. But I'm just curious about your thoughts on, you know, his use of CGI, and even too with, you know, like his, you know, because he does so many takes, he doesn't want to use squibs. And so we have all, you know, the fake blood and all this stuff, the CGI squibs and everything. That really stands out to me in a lot of places. And strangely too, you know, because otherwise, you know, the murder scenes are done so well, and they're so impactful. And visceral, then you have and visceral, and then even with like the stabbing death, it's like so very clearly a retractable knife, because you know the angles at which things are happening seem kind of off,
and there's almost no weight to the
and you see like the CGI, you know, and I now look, we're watching this. I think both of us have said that we're on the Blu-ray watching this, so I wonder how much of this he has fixed in the new 4K release. Just we kind of hinted at that with like he's released Panic Room 7, like a handful of his films have just come out on 4K, and he's kind of done a lot of touch-ups to special effects and a lot of other things. So I don't know if he's gone in and done that with this film. But it's interesting to me how, you know, when you do rely on technology like that, eventually I feel like it's going to show.
Well, you are sort of tying yourself to a time, right? Like you are tying yourself to the technology of the day.
Yeah, well, and look, you know, cinema is about technology. I mean, you're always going to be tying with the choice of camera that you use, and do you choose film or do you choose digital? You know, what lenses? I mean, in some ways, you have to tie yourself to a certain technology.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Now, how prevalent or how obvious will that be to an audience at large, though? Right, is another thing. But I was just kind of curious, did those things stand out to you as well, or kind of what are your thoughts? Because I know he always works so hard to make that seamless. I'm just curious.
Well,
what are
I
your
think
thoughts in general?
It's funny that we're doing, again, I mentioned The Cell before, but like it's funny that we're doing this right after, because The Cell is also a movie where you know, great use of and I mean great in a sort of like you know, numerical sense, use of CG there, like, but the CG there is totally different. It's not supposed to be photoreal. It's you know, used for effect and kind of grand dream sequences and things like that. Whereas here, it's the opposite. It's used to be photorealistic and to be completely immersed in the real world. Now, I will say, I think that there are some parts of this movie where I think the effects still to this day may not like hold up perfectly, but I'm still very impressed with them on a technical level. So I think that shot of the Transamerica Pyramid being built, I think that looks really neat. I think a lot of the like compositing in this movie, they do a lot like where it's not explicitly CGI in terms of like computer generated imagery, but there's, you know, background swapping and things like that. I think a lot of that work actually holds up quite well. I think one of the scenes like where it doesn't necessarily hold up, but it's still impressive, is the Washington and Cherry murder of the taxi driver. Like that whole crime scene is shot on blue screens, and the entire set is faked. And I think the first few times I watched the movie, I didn't even realize that. I thought something looks a little bit off here, but I just assumed that it was something with the digital camera they were using. But no, that whole scene is shot with like green screen or blue screens. Like if you watch the BTS of that scene, it's quite impressive how seamless it looks, even if it's not perfect from a technical standpoint. But I also think, though, at the same time, like in a similar way that, you know, the sort of like simplicity of a lot of the practical effects in the original Star Wars kind of add to the charm of a movie like that. The intricacy and almost dependence that Fincher has here on CG sort of almost add to the uncanniness of this story. Like that scene with the taxi, where it's like, the camera's like locked to the taxi from overhead. You know, that looks sort of weird, but it's also a choice that Fincher's making. You know, like he could have very easily rendered that scene where the camera was sort of more free floating, and you know that had been done before this. You look at, you know, the Raimi Spider-Man movies, right, where they made a city out of CG. It was one of the first examples of them doing that, and the camera floats totally normally in that movie, whereas here he's making very deliberate choices that sort of add to this uncanny weirdness. And I think he brings that in almost all aspects of the movie, from the fact that the camera they're using is, again, very early digital, so it has this like almost broadcast look to it, and the motion blur is sort of weird and everything's kind of smooth. A lot of the performances are sort of odd.
Well, tell me a little bit more about that. Like, let's dive into that just real quick. I don't want to digress too far off this, but I'm kind of curious when you say that. Like, what are your thoughts on the performances? Like, how do you feel like they're off a little bit?
When I say off, I mean that when it's not necessarily our main characters. Our main characters are quite human and quite normal. Obviously, Jake Gyllenhaal's playing a guy who's kind of an odd fellow, but it feels real. But you've got these, like, every time, the first two murder scenes in specific, when the cop shows up at the first scene on his motorcycle, he like calmly gets off his bike and kind of walks over to the guy with the flashlight, and then walks around really slowly, and he's not saying anything, and it almost feels
he's not
like
acting with any urgency.
Like
There's no
it
urgency.
feels like a tableau, and it's very clearly a choice. Like, this is not a mistake.
That stood out to me. That stood out.
The second one too. When
what do you think he's saying with that? Well, just real quick.
I think it's
I want you to
like
keep.
this...
I want you to keep going on, but because I noticed that too, and I'm glad you brought that up. I want you to keep going with the other examples, but I don't want to get so far ahead that we lose an opportunity to talk about this too. So what do you think it is? Because that stood out to me quite a bit here. I don't know if it did on my previous viewings, but here it stood out to me and was like actually quite like unnerving, right? It like, obviously we've just seen like this depiction of profound violence, and we assume that, I actually thought both of them were going to be dead, but we kind of see after the fact that the kid is, at least the boy, is still alive, or maybe they're both still alive at this point, right? So I'm kind of thinking like, oh crap, like hurry up, but
get on
because
the radio.
The cop like, holy crap, like get some CPR. Well, they probably didn't have CPR back then, I forget exactly, but my point, like you would expect some urgency, you would expect like, oh crap, like I'd be running, like check the person in the car, check the person here, okay, get on the radio, we got to get ambulance, go. And but the police officer pulls up, and it's like, and also too, we only see kind of like the lower half of his body, I think, at least for a good chunk of it. But
you never see his face.
And he like just super casually, like kind of is like very slowly, like we can see that he sees what's happening, so it's not like he doesn't understand that there are two people who are near death here, and like this like horrible grisly murder attempted murder, has just happened. It's like, oh yeah, I'm just kind of checking things out, super casual, super slow, to the point where I was like, wait a minute, is this like, what's going on here? Like, it was like, I was confused. Like, I was actually confused by that as an audience. Like, what's going on? Like, is this person connected to the killer? Is that like, why are they not, like, is this somebody else in like a costume? They're not really a cop. Like, I don't know, that it almost like threw me off.
My take on it is just that it's like heightening the reality in terms of the fact that this is such a weird story, and I think one of the reasons that the Zodiac Killer has remained so like prevalent in pop culture is because he's really weird. Like he wrote these weird
and
letters.
never been caught. And
Never been caught. Yeah, of course. Yeah. But
yeah.
like these letters were weird. I think one of the reasons, that he was also very famous for the time too. Weird letters. Probably a really weird guy. I mean, if you go by this movie, it kind of indicts Arthur Lee Allen, who was a weird guy. But there's discrepancies as to whether he was really the killer. Blah blah blah. And I think that by what Fincher is doing, and I don't know if I can speak to this super specifically because I don't know, but my guess is just that he is heightening the oddity of this time and this story by not necessarily portraying these moments as they would have occurred realistically in terms of like the urgency and things like that, but almost just the bizarreness of everything. And it's like each of the killings is almost bizarre in a certain way. Even after the Lake Berryessa murder. Well, that conversation they have at Lake Berryessa is weird. Like the things that they talk about, even the way that he's like, I'm stealing your car and I'm going to Mexico, and it's like this very kind of odd.
I've just escaped prison. Yeah, and, the whole thing is weird. And
then when it pushes in on him later on, because that guy also survived, like those two murders, only the women actually died, and you see him in a towel leaning against a truck, and he's like completely like he's leaning against a ranger's truck, so there's other people there that have found him, but he's completely alone, and it's like this guy's suffering from stab wounds, and he's just kind of left on his own in his blanket. There's nobody around him, so it is like this heightened, and of course, the car scene when the woman has her baby, even after that, like the two people that find her on the road are sort of keeping their distance from her. Like it all feels, again, very sterile and uncanny. And it's like and it's very clearly intentional. Like it's done with intention to, now what that intention is, I've never heard Fincher specify, but my guess is just that it makes you feel weird. It makes you feel odd.
Well, I've got a hypothesis here. As you speak, as you do a great job kind of, describing these scenes and kind of tying them together in ways that they are, that you're right, that Fincher is depicting them and the similarities. Here's what I'm seeing, that these characters who walk in, so to speak, on these acts of violence, whether it's the police officer, it's there's a handful of like responders to the couple at the lake. There's the truck driver and the lady who are responding to. Now she's not a victim in the sense that, she's not been killed, and thankfully her baby is revealed to still be alive, which is like a great suspenseful moment, because right before that we hear the guy driving say, "I'm going to throw out you're going to have to watch me throw your baby out the window before I kill you," which is like woo, chilling, right? And then we just see her standing on the side of the road. Is that all of these people are they're observers. So even the police officer is almost more observing than acting. It's like we see kind of people outside of the event itself, and the people directly part of that event are almost kind of more observing than they are acting or interacting in those moments. Maybe there, I don't know if that's an intention of his, but it's kind of, as you started to describe it, I don't know, that was something that maybe kind of, it's a thought that I had, and I'll take it even kind of further, because as we kind of talk about, the structure of this story, how he's put it together, I don't know how similar or dissimilar it is than the book, and maybe you can help shed a little light on that, because I've only seen the film myself, but, what is the film really about? Is it really about the Kodak, the Zodiac Killer, not the Kodak Killer? That was digital.
that was the digital. Thompson Viper.
That was the Thompson Viper. The Thompson Viper was the Kodak Killer, but the Zodiac Killer, the Zodiac Killer, is the film really about that? Yeah. I would argue that it's not. The film is really about, a couple, the police, a couple of the cops that are on that case. It's about a couple of the people working at the Chronicle who are, observing and writing about and trying to kind of figure out what's going on, whether that's Robert Downey Jr.'s character.
Obsession, yeah.
Right, and then of course with Jake whose last name? Come on, pronounce his last name for me.
Gyllenhaal.
Say it. Say it again.
Gyllenhaal.
Gyllenhaal.
Jake
So
Gyllenhaal.
So I have this thing where I like pronounce his last name incorrectly, kind of on purpose, because it's kind of I don't know, how do I say this? I mean, I have nothing obviously against, like, personally against Jake at all. I mean, I don't even know the guy. I've never met the guy, and I think that he's a great actor. There's not even any issues there. Maybe it's just because he's like a handsome guy with a great head of hair, and maybe I'm just jealous if I really just like get down, like deep down to my feelings. So I always just mispronounce. Like whenever I'm like, my wife and I are like sitting, you know, he comes on, I'm like, oh, it's Jake Giggly Goo or whatever. And so anyway, my whole point with the story is that by the time I actually have to pronounce his name correctly, I can't, because I've mispronounced it so many different ways for such a long period of time. So anyway, okay, let's get back to it. But yeah, and Jake, of course, you know, I mean, his life kind of revolves around his obsession, his observance of this, of the Zodiac Killer. So I don't know. I mean, you know, you could make a good argument that it's really about all these people's, you know, lives around this character and his actions. And I don't know, you know, so maybe he's taking it even so far as to have that play out very literally in those scenes.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the things that with the structure of this movie that really also intrigues me, is that it plays out like a timeline. You know, like there's not really a standard 3-act structure here. There's like some big time jumps. But what that does to me is it does a really good job of displaying how much time passed between these things. And so by the end of the movie, when people are saying, you know, like, who cares? Like, you know, 100 times the amount of people that he ever killed have been killed on the freeway in the past year, you know, all this stuff. Right. You kind of agree with like, you kind of are like, yeah, because you really do feel this sense that time has moved on. I think that the film does a really interesting thing with like its you know, production design, in that each era almost has this color to it. The early, you know, late 60s scenes when right at the beginning are all like, even this newsroom is, the poles are yellow and the desks are all yellow and things like that. And then by the end of the film, that's all repainted to blue. Jake Gyllenhaal's wearing more blue. Like it kind of, even the color grade is slightly cooler. So it does this really interesting thing with production design in terms of showing this passage of time. I think it does it really well. I agree. And again, it because the movie is more about the culture and the people that were sort of obsessed with this story than it is about the Zodiac Killer himself. You do sort of get this sense of like, you know, what's the point of all this at this point?
What is the point of all of this at this point?
Yes, exactly. At this point, the point is, you know, but it does a really interesting, like, I think it kind of takes it in an interesting direction like that. Because the other thing too, and again, just to sort of expand on my point earlier about it being sort of like, it's almost like a timeline, like it's laid out like a timeline, where we'd mentioned this scene with the woman in the car. That's not even a confirmed Zodiac Killer event. Like that is speculated to have been him. But it's not confirmed. Like there's no, again, they mention this in the movie, that the details he gives in the letter about that are all found in the newspaper. And, you know, all these sorts of things. The guy matched the description that other people had given, and his voice matched and things like that. So it's, you know, it could have been. But it's not confirmed. And so it kind of becomes this thing where it's like, well, why is that in the movie then? Because none of our characters ever really interact with that character. The police officers we know, they don't deal with that crime. There's no investigation of it. It's literally just a small little vignette that happens in the middle of the movie. Good point. And I think the reason that that's in there, and the reason that scene works for me, is because it is adding to this kind of discombobulation of the story. Much in the same way that when Jake Gyllenhaal goes on this kind of wild goose chase trying to find this Rick Marshall fellow, and that sort of leads almost nowhere. Like he goes to that basement. There's that really scary scene in the basement where the guy's being really creepy.
Charles Fleischer, by the way.
Charles Fleischer, Charles. Exactly. Yeah.
Great Charles, if you're listening.
Fantastic performance again. But that
I'm actually trying
also
to get
sort of-
him on the podcast. I'm actually trying.
Oh,
to
really?
Get, I just
Let's-
I've been reading.
Great, yeah. If you're
just,
listening,
just a super,
please.
just a super quick little note. Yeah, I when I first came to LA, I forget exactly how. Oh, I remember when I first moved to LA. I went to, I think I'm almost positive it was the Comedy Store, and it just coincidentally he like closed the night. And we just were like walking by on Sunset and just went in. It wasn't like this was planned or we had kind of put this together. So it was, almost kind of like a surprise. I'd never seen him do stand up. I don't even think that I knew he did stand up.
I didn't.
But
either.
I was totally taken by his stand up though. I thought it was really unique and super entertaining, funny. And he's a really unique guy with a really unique perspective and look on things. Anyway, somehow, like, I don't even remember how this happened, but somehow we kind of got connected. And I met him and then his daughter at like a coffee shop, like some point later, and we had like a couple phone conversations. Anyway, I'm not suggesting that I like know the guy or anything. I'm not trying to paint it like that, but I've always just been kind of fascinated with both his roles, and I think he does something really interesting here in the short kind of amount of time that he has as a character on screen. But I think he really does a great job, and he's kind of that guy, right? Aside from Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where obviously he does the voice there of Roger Rabbit. I feel he always kind of comes in and out of a film, and he is not a lead or anything like this, but he, I think, always leaves an impression and makes a mark on a film.
Yeah, well, he's kind of almost a character actor in that sense. Like he comes in. He's
he's
really
definitely
strong performance.
Yeah,
and
he's 100%.
kills a role
Yeah, 100%.
in a scene, and
Yeah. But anyway, for anybody else out there, I mean, if you didn't know, he also is actually a really fantastic comedian. And so if you ever get a chance to see him, I'm not sure if he still performs live or not, but highly recommend checking him out. And yes, hey, maybe one of these days.
Fingers crossed.
I let him know. Yeah. I let him know that I was moving away from LA. Matter of fact, actually just last night. And for the first time ever, instead of like just saying no, he said possibly. So we'll see. Fingers crossed.
There you go.
Fingers crossed. Okay,
yes,
so sorry
knock on
about
wood.
back to this.
No, I think that I mean that's a good point to touch on, because that reminded me as you were saying that when you were describing him kind of coming in and doing the scene, is that each of the Zodiac killers in the scenes are all played by different people too. In all the murders, they're cast as different actors. So.
And you never get a clear sense of them, right? I mean, it's kind of their shapes. They're kind of shapes, but you can...
And that's because it's going up, again, the movie's about the cultural phenomenon. Yeah. So you might as well have these different police sketches playing these characters, right? You might as well have these threads that don't go anywhere, because that's what this story is about.
And we never find out.
Yeah,
we never find out who it is, and so how could you show? Right, you couldn't. You wouldn't. It wouldn't make any sense to show them distinctly who these people were, because then you'd be like, I know who the killer is. It's that guy.
I mean, for a movie that is, I mean, how long is it? It's 162 minutes. The director's cut, 157 the theatrical. So it's long, and for a movie that is that long, to have these threads that don't really go, like, you could cut that whole Rick Marshall plot out of the movie with just a few tie-ups and just have Jake Gyllenhaal kind of realize, oh, it's Arthur Lee Allen, or at least he thinks it is, and get there, and you would save 25-30 minutes of the movie probably, yet it's vital to the movie, at least in my opinion, because it kind of represents these threads that just go nowhere, and it kind of it almost makes you downtrodden along with these characters, where it's just like, God, what a mess of information to have to untangle to even begin to get anywhere with this. So I think that's one of the things that I really like about the structure here, is that, again, like, you just have these kind of vignettes that are related to the story, and they're involved. I mean, if you read the book, they're in there. And yet, how are they related to our characters? Well, it's just a massive information mess, and it's like, okay, well, what do I remember from this thing and this thing and this thing? What are the similarities there? You kind of almost are trying to do your own detective work, and I think that's one of the things that makes this movie really great, is you come out of it, at least I come out of this movie wanting to immediately go back and reread this book and like, what did I miss last time? What more can I kind of parse together and figure out? And you know, and I
mean,
think
it is because you're I mean, it's right. I mean, I think your response is not dissimilar from a lot of people's responses, right? I mean, like you said, it was a large cultural event in its era it was, and it remains something that's captivating to a lot of people because it is, you know, and this is part of why true crime is captivating, you know, just in general. It's like you have these inherently dramatic because there's often there's tragedy and there's loss and there's violence, right? There are victims, and so it has all of those elements that make stories captivating, right? And when you have something like this where it's not solved, there's no conclusion. There's no the third act hasn't been completed in this story in real life, right? It just hangs there, and it will likely never be solved. Although I understand that people are still. Yeah, it's like Jack Ripper kind of thing, but people are still at it. It's my understanding that even as late as like maybe, what was it, 4 or 5 years ago, a group of people were able to decipher one of the broken ciphers.
And they actually named, there was one of the police departments actually named a new suspect for the first time like 3 or 4 years ago.
Oh, wow, I hadn't heard that.
And again, it's also one of these things where, you know, as time passes on, it becomes more and more impossible. I think the only real route to solving this at this point would be DNA, and they've got very limited DNA from the letters.
Likely the Zodiac is almost certainly long dead at this point. Oh, yes, I would imagine. Yeah. Certainly. So, but I was just going to say that it's like I think that the same thing, the same kind of like that part of the human condition that we see illustrated in Jake's character, you know, in Robert Graysmith, is the same thing that it's right. You see yourself and so many other people in the audience to see them. You know, you can really empathize with his need to want to solve this, or at least at the very least, his interest in it. Right? We've all been kind of wrapped up in trying to like solve something, you know, figure out this riddle or whatever it is in your life.
Yeah, so I mean, it's the definition of a rabbit hole, right? Like, you open one thing and suddenly you're sucked into this conspiracy of. I mean, it sort of reminds me of like,
which has kind of become a pandemic in and of itself in the world, right? I mean,
yes,
people falling down rabbit holes nowadays is the true pandemic of our society. Yeah. But I digress. I don't want to get off on that, but
yeah. But yeah, that was just one of the reasons that I was going to say that it and another thing that I think the film handles really well too is, you know, Robert Graysmith in both of his books is very much, you know, very forward in identifying Arthur Lee Allen and saying, I believe that he's the killer. That moment at the end where he shows up at the hardware store really did happen in real life, albeit slightly differently. They were actually in the parking lot. But he did see him and actually do this thing.
Right, actually physically run into him. Wow.
Where he said, I have to go and see him. I don't want to look at him and know that it's him. And so that was kind of his conclusion. So in both these books, he concludes quite definitively that Arthur Lee Allen is the killer. And there's a good chance that he was, because there's so much, you know, albeit circumstantial, but evidence pointed towards that. But what I think the movie does really, really well is that it never moves that beyond the opinion of our protagonist. It sort of agrees with him. You know, I don't think that Fincher is you know, saying that he's wrong in this, but it never really explicitly in a kind of a divorced from Robert Graysmith's opinion. It doesn't divorce its opinion from that. And so even at the end, you know, we've got these two final scenes, which are of course, Graysmith showing up at the hardware store, looking at Arthur Lee Allen, and kind of they have this moment of recognizing each other seemingly, and Graysmith leaves and sort of has his conclusion there. And then later on, you know, the sort of epilogue of the film is we have Mike Mageau, who was the first, not the first victim, but the first victim we see in the movie on the Lover's Lane. Right?
Yeah, he survived.
Yep. And he's at this airport in Ontario, California, and he, you know, points out in a lineup of photos Arthur Lee Allen as well. So the film is not shying away from naming who it thinks it is.
Yeah.
However, again, it definitely does something very interesting, which is that it puts you in Graysmith's shoes in the sense that it still feels like an opinion at the end.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of movies like this would kind of preach a truth as fact to the audience at the end, and sort of, more than just imply that they believe, that the filmmakers or writers believe that this guy is the killer, but rather present it as a fact. So it's kind of it's fascinating.
Well, I think that just speaks again to the tone and the stance of this film, or what this film is I guess, quote unquote, about. Which, as we've stated before, the film is not about solving the murder. The film is not even really about the Zodiac Killer. The film is about how this cultural event, how it affected the culture, how it affected the city, and how it affected these other people around it, these other characters who happen to actually exist in real life. And I think and even by extension, like, how do these things affect us? And I mean, they've impacted you. I mean, you've taken, I don't know how many hours of your life to read about this specifically. I mean, it's impacted you. You have opinions about it. You have feelings about it. I don't know. You may or may not have your own opinion. Do you think that this guy did it or didn't do it, or is this other person? So it is, and it impacts us in larger ways. I mean, these kind of events, they shape cities, they shape legislature, they shape law, and they shape a society. How do we feel when we are out at the lake with our partner, or we are driving down the street at night alone in the dark, or whatever else, right? Now, some of these things, unfortunately, seem kind of quaint to us now, sadly, because I just feel like now we're exposed to, murder and violence pretty regularly, unfortunately. So, but, another thing is to think about, it's my understanding that this kind of crime back then really stood out. That it wasn't like there was just a constant steady stream of these types of crimes being committed, at least in San Francisco back then. So it
and the publicity from the newspapers and all that too, just added to kind of media frenzy, right?
Right.
Yeah, I also the one thing I do want to sort of talk about too in terms of tone, and I think that this actually affects the tone a lot, and we've mentioned it a few times, but is the use of a digital camera, and this is, of course, again, pretty early movie for that. Fincher was an early adapter, and I actually think that a lot of this movie looks shockingly good for a very early digital camera. These especially cameras,
the well lit indoor stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing, is that the not to get super technical, but these cameras were using broadcast sensors, which had very limited dynamic range. So you had to be so careful with how you expose these images. And I think of it almost like it, to me, sort of likens it to shooting on really early film stocks, where it's like you had such limited dynamic range. You had to expose super carefully. And because of that, there's extreme care and precision taken in how this movie is shot. And that actually ends up making it look really, really good. I think that there are a few moments where it doesn't look great. Notably, like you mentioned, the nighttime,
the
scenes
opening scene. The opening scene, I was really surprised. The film opens up and we're in the car with the young lady and her boyfriend, or I don't know if they're, but the couple. And I almost was like, there was actually a second where I literally kind of checked all of my home theater settings to make sure, and I was like, whoa, okay, is there something on my end? Did I somehow mess up the contrast on the TV? Oh, wait a minute. Is this maybe like an early Blu-ray, and like the encoding and the bit rate is maybe this is really compressed? And then you had mentioned this earlier, that maybe they had actually switched to film for a part of this, but then it was like literally in the next scene, it looked great. And I was like, okay, whoa, okay. And then I started to put it together. I'm like, okay, but I literally thought something was wrong with my setup in that first scene. It looked so bad.
It's these digital cameras still, obviously they do night and darkness now very well, better than film.
Yeah.
But back then, like low light
So
digital
much
stuff
noise.
was God, yeah. And they probably used a lot of noise removal on this, which is why it kind of looks weirdly smooth. And but yeah, for the most part, this movie looks really good. And I think that in a way, again, I think this sterility sort of works with the tone that the movie's going for. But yeah, I just wanted to briefly mention that, just because I think it's kind of actually a big part of how this movie feels. In the look of it. But yeah, I think that like again, we've touched on this briefly, but I think just as we kind of come near the end here, is just to emphasize the performances in this movie. And
I'm so glad that you came back to that, because I was
and just
great.
how important they are, and how really, really on top of it everybody is in this. Robert Downey Jr. is great. I think Gyllenhaal is like so weird, but also feels very Gyllenhaal. Like he's like an odd little fellow, and he does.
It feels really genuine.
So much of this, yeah,
it feels so genuine. And and just you mentioned Robert Downey Jr. He is great in this, and this was the context of this for him. I mean, this is really near the beginning of his comeback, his big renaissance, and deservedly so. He's been such a great actor throughout his entire life, and it is one of.
And I know you're a huge fan of him in the Marvel movies, so.
well, okay. So I'm not a big fan of the Marvel movies, but honestly, I am a fan of him. And
yeah, I think he's the strongest part of those.
Yeah, and I actually thought the first Iron Man movie was like not too bad. I thought it was totally watchable. And why? Because the movie really does like focus on him and gives him a lot of room to shine in that film. So I'm not even a hater of of that, but anyway, but yeah, he's great. He's always a joy. And sorry to steal this away from you, but you'd mentioned him, and I just wanted to. Robert, if you're listening and you want to come on the podcast,
we know you're a huge fan. I actually saw him do stand up, so I'm just kidding. But no, and then Mark Ruffalo. I just like how Mark Ruffalo kind of seems like a teacher in this movie in a funny way. Like he just always kind of seems like he's just a little. He's he's soft spoken, but then he's also at the same time kind of just always just like, man, I really didn't want that to happen like that. Like he's got this kind of attitude.
But you also kind of know like not to mess with him. Like I feel like there's a gravitas to him. But I think Mark's always great. He's always got a gravitas to him. Anthony Edwards.
Oh, I guess he ended up playing the Hulk too. So there you go. I completely forgot that they're both. And Jake Gyllenhaal was in one of the Spider-Man movies. I think is he's some villain or something.
I don't know. I can't remember.
So all three of these guys have been in the all-consuming eye of Marvel.
But then you have the supporting cast, though. I mean, I think Anthony Edwards, I think he's still a lead in the beginning of the film, but then, like you said, it's kind of a slightly different story structure, and that these characters start to kind of peel off, and where you would expect, like I think where the normal movie, where the average kind of movie about this would stop, this film has like another film left to go. And so these characters kind of peel off, and you see, and again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I think the film is about how everybody's reacting to this. And Anthony Edwards' character, Inspector Bill Armstrong, right? He's like, hey, eventually he's like, I have to be able to see my family. I got to peel myself off of this. Like I can't keep doing this with you. But I always
how isolating and lonely this obsession has made these people feel, right? Like that's how the ending feels. Is just of course, Graysmith was divorced. The real story of Paul Avery is actually quite different from how it's portrayed here. But I think thematically it works better for the movie to have him end up the way that he does here. He actually had quite a pleasant ending to his life. And then of course Toschi as well is like he just almost feels kind of alienated from his life too. So it's they really, but that again, to wrap it back into the performances, it's like it's so dependent on how these guys play these characters over this course of 15 years I think it takes place over.
Do you think this is what Fincher feels like about his life as a director? Like when he becomes, I mean, I don't even know if he is, but let's say, a guy that wants to do 100 takes of something might be obsessive about his work. Maybe I'm
Perhaps
just
just
gonna
a little bit.
I'm gonna maybe guess that. Do you think
Yeah.
maybe is this like some kind of expression of, is the Zodiac Killer a film project for Mr. Fincher? And are these all of these different characters, are they different aspects or different facets of Fincher's kind of response to how a film project may capture his attention for a period of time and consume him? Could be.
Is the artist in the art.
And you have Philip Baker Hall. You have Philip Baker Hall.
Philip
in
Baker,
this,
Philip
right?
Baker Hall's fantastic in this too. Yeah, he's
he's
always great.
Donald
Elias
Logue?
Koteas.
Is it Logue? Is it Logue? Donald Logue?
Yeah, Donald Logue.
I shared this with you, but I want to share it with the rest of the audience there. Donald Logue has he's Captain Ken Narlow in this. When I was a kid, I knew him so affectionately as Billy the cab driver, or Jimmy the cab driver. On MTV. He did like a series of shorts that they would like throw in between music videos back when MTV was a thing and they played music videos. So I highly recommend that you go onto YouTube and just search for Jimmy the cab driver MTV and catch some of his seriously early work. Yeah. I thought it was hysterical when I was a kid. It may not be your cup of tea, but I loved it. John Carroll Lynch.
Oh, I was just going to mention him. Yeah,
so
Margie's
good.
husband. Margie's husband from Fargo.
Which I just.
He's amazing in this. He's he's really, really unsettling, and
he's so good. He's so good in every. I love him.
Yeah. He's fantastic.
I feel like he's so good in so many things, and he's one of those people too, where, like in this film, he's so creepy. It's just I'm like scared by his performance. But then, like you said, in Fargo, I have like the warmest feeling for him. Like I mean? I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like such a good guy. I mean, I would so totally love to be this guy's neighbor, or his friend,
Well, and it's even. I think one of the things again that really draws everything kind of neatly together is just that the casting in this movie is like they've got these, as we sort of mentioned before, they've got all these people who are only in the movie for like 5, 10, 15 minutes, and yet they're played by these wonderful character actors. So they're so distinct. I mean, even
substantial people, substantial people that would not be in these roles.
The actors, I can't remember the actor's name, but the guy that replaces Paul Avery at the Chronicle in the 80s, he kind of
Adam Goldberg. Adam Goldberg.
He is in the movie for probably 45 seconds. And yet he is like just the characterization of that moment where it's like,
it's great.
This really kind of awkward, rude, uncomfortable conversation.
He's perfect. He's the guy from Dazed and Confused and Saving Private Ryan. And if you, what was, and I'm trying to remember the exact name, but he directed something too that I thought was so funny. Oh, what was that? Hebrew Hammer, I highly recommend if you ever get a chance. I think he actually, I don't think he directed it, but I think he was a big part of the creation of that film. Anyway, Hebrew Hammer, if you get a chance, it's a smaller film, but he's a big part of that. It's great. But yeah, you have like Clea Duvall is in a super short scene where she's, in a conversation that's maybe 2 or 3 minutes long. And I think that's the entirety of her. But there's a lot of people like that. But that's when you're Fincher, I guess that's what you get,
Yeah. No, it's really just well cast in general. You just have I think that's one of it's such a rich world.
I've got a suggestion.
Takes place in. Yeah.
I've got a suggestion. Next film that you whether short film doesn't matter. Next project that you direct, this would be fun to see. Don't tell any of your actors, any of your intentions, right? But just go into it and have your actors do 50 to 100 takes of every scene, including inserts, and make them be there for inserts. They have to do their own inserts, which is apparently is what happened in this film. And you got to do your own inserts and do 50 takes of everything, and just see I'm curious to see how that impacts the performances and your relationship with your actors on set, and then report back. Then we can talk about that in a later episode.
We can kind of do, and then we can have what's his name on the podcast, and he can talk about what it was like. We can compare notes.
David Fincher, we can have him on the podcast.
No, Charles Fleischer.
Charles? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Compare notes.
We'll ask Charles what it was like to be directed by Fincher. Yeah, for sure. But anything else that? Yeah.
The only thing I want to
Anything else
say
before we
is
wrap
that
up?
any movie that uses Jerry Rafferty's Baker Street is all right in my books.
There
and
you
this
go.
plays it on the radio in the little hardware store at the end, and I love that song.
Perfect.
So A+.
There you go. And that now we get to the real reason why your love for this film and why you chose it. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that, Colin.
No.
Well, I mean, on that note, we come yet again to the end of another discussion of a film that I would say you love quite deeply, and I think is pretty okay. How's that?
There we go.
There we
Sums
go.
it up nicely.
But and we hope that you at least felt like your time with us today was pretty okay. But thanks for hanging in there and taking a listen. We always appreciate it, and we'll catch you on the flip side.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Boom.